Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. This is Chris. I'm here with Justin, and we return for our 20th episode. And this one is, I don't want to call it an outright request because I feel like I wasn't asked by the band to do this. I want to make that very clear. It was just one of the guitar players just said it would be cool to hear you talk about our album. And so I took it upon myself to recommend it as, you know, a request week album. But how are you doing, Justin?
I am doing very, very well. It's fun. It's funny. I think that's a request, and maybe you won't frame it that way. To me, that's a request. But I'll say this: we actually have had a bunch of requests come in, and ironically, they've been kind of all over the map in terms of genre and albums and stuff like that. And we actually had 2 requests for the same band for a much smaller progressive metal band. I was kind of surprised because it was 2 people that don't know each other, obviously complete strangers. So it's just interesting when we see these requests come in, and they're coming in at such a fast clip that we may actually incorporate more than just the one a month. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. This is an album I'm very much looking forward to. So I'm happy that the guitarist reached out, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to hearing more about how you found out about the band, because I believe you were the one who introduced me to the band at a point in time. So that'll probably be new information for me. So I wanted to ask, what have you been listening to this week? Anything across your desk that you've really enjoyed or caught your interest?
Yeah, there were 2 things in particular, and then I just got a quick story for you, which is kind of interesting and a little sobering at the same time. I'll get to the albums that I wanted to just talk about first. There's a band out of Houston who I had never heard of. They're called Framing Skeletons. They came out with a new album called Luminescence. They are really, really good, and the songwriting was particularly good for a band that's a fairly new prog metal band. And I thought the production was actually quite good too, because even the bass really just sticks out in terms of what they're doing. So I'm going to post one of their tracks this week. Again, they're called Framing Skeletons. They're out of Houston, Texas, and I think that's definitely worth a listen. And then something in the polar opposite vein, the new Blood Red Hourglass single called Drag Me the Rain just came out. They're a melodic death metal band from Finland. I enjoyed their last album because they really kind of put the melodic in the melodic death metal, which is something I always look for in that genre. And I thought the single was great. So I look forward to hearing the full album when it's released. I think it's coming out this spring.
Very cool. I'll have to check those out myself.
One other thing I just thought you'd get a kick out of. Do you remember that band Mind Odyssey? They were like a German prog metal band, kind of in the vein of like a Queensryche or an early Fates Warning. And then they kind of morphed into like a more obscure or more offbeat progressive metal band as time went on. Do you remember them? Yeah,
I mean, actually, we always kind of go back to talking about that initial mixtape that, our friend Ralph made for me when we were in high school. And, I remember that the song "I've Opened My Eyes" was on that mixtape by Mind Odyssey, and I figured to myself like, "Oh, there's a band I'll probably hear from again." And I don't know that I've ever really heard much from them again after that, but yeah, I am definitely remember that one song.
Yeah, that was an awesome song. That was the last song on their debut release, Keep It All Turning. It came out in 1993, and to me, it kind of has, at least in retrospect, like an late 90s, I should say, or an early 90s Queensryche, as I said, Fates Warning vibe to it. Really cool stuff. They came out with a bunch of albums after that in the mid to late 90s. Their best to me was an album called Nailed to the Shade. It came out in 1998. Really, really interesting stuff. And an album that I actually go back to even to this day. But the reason I bring this up is a friend of mine had sent me a text message about, I guess I should say we were talking about other things. This band came up and I had asked him if he remembered Mind Odyssey. And he goes, yeah, never really my thing, but I do remember it. And I asked him if he had heard their newest release, Time to Change It. They had reformed, after their late 90s breakup. And he goes, no, I never heard it. I never really had an interest in hearing it. And I said to him, oh, it came out a couple of years ago. And then I looked and it came out in 2009. And I said to myself, my God, where does the time go? It's been 12 years since their re-released album came out, or I should say that their new album came out. I was not really a fan of the album, but it just goes to show you that like time flies on you, man. Literally that album came out in 2009 and it felt like it came out 3 years ago.
Oh my God, that's wild.
Yeah,
Are they still around? Did you mention, are they still around or?
Yeah, so like I said, they broke up in the late 90s, reformed to come out with this album in 2009, and then haven't been heard from since. So I have to think that they're dormant at this point.
Right.
Don't really waste your time so much with the 2009 release, but if you're looking to go back to the old stuff, check out Nailed to the Shade. It's kind of a underground progressive metal masterpiece, at least in my eyes.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about it in a future episode.
That's not a bad idea. Have you heard anything good this week?
4 albums came out on Friday, and I managed to listen to about half of one of them, and that was the new Epica album, Omega. And, what I heard so far, I listened to the first 7 tracks. We were talking about Amorphous being this just consistent band. Like, every album is great. Epica, I think, deserves to be in that conversation as well. It's like every album they come out with is really, really strong. And this one, at least the first half, is no exception. Anneke van Giersbergen also released her first solo album in a while. At least her first studio solo album in a while. The Darkest Skies Are the Brightest. Evergrey released their new album, Escape of the Phoenix, and Moonspell released their new album, Hermitage. I'm looking forward to listening to all of them. The Evergrey singles I've heard so far are some of the best for me, and I've never been a professed Evergrey fan. Some of the best Evergrey songs I've ever heard. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the whole thing and maybe finally having a newfound respect for Evergrey, who, I've just always kind of considered a little bit overrated based on
it's kind of funny. I have to add them to the list of albums to choose because they are, at least for us, I guess, very polarizing. I love some of their stuff, and some of it is just better than others, I guess. There was a period there in the kind of the mid 2000s, late 2010ish area. They came out with a couple of albums that haven't really done it for me, but I thought the last 2 albums and then the new one, this being the third, they've really returned to form, and I think there's a reason for that, but that's a story for another episode. I'm a huge fan of In Search of Truth and Recreation Day and some of those older Evergrey albums. I think our opinions differ on that, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts when you hear the full album. I think it's very good. I'm not going to say it's better than the last one. I just think it was a solid release, and I'm very curious to hear what you think. It's they're very consistent as well, or at least they've kind of gone in waves where they'll release 2 or 3 albums in a row that are just fantastic, and then a couple that I just think are not, maybe don't hold up quite as well, but they've been on a hot streak as of late.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And another thing I definitely wanted to point out is that there's a couple of singles that have been released from this project called Heart Healer, which was done by Magnus Carlsen, who is the guitar player for Primal Fear, and he also has his own band, Magnus Carlsen's what is it called? What's that?
Freefall.
Yes. And he's working on this new project with all female vocalists, 7 of them. And so they released one track with Nora from Battle Beast, and they released another track called This Is Not the End, which I think has all 7 vocalists on it. And the cast includes Adrian Cohen from Seven Spires, Island, who is in the band Her Chariot Awaits and used to sing for Serenia, who we mentioned last week, I believe. Netta Loren, who's the singer from Smackbound and also has a project that she's working with Nora from Battle Beast. Yumna from Austera, kind of a probably a lesser known prog metal band. Nora, as mentioned, Margarita Monet, who's the singer from Edge of Paradise, and somebody we all know, Annette Olsen from The Dark Element and formerly of Nightwish. So with a cast like that, I mean, I am the 2 songs I've heard so far are fabulous, and I really can't wait to hear the rest.
Yeah, you've been off the air plugging that one song with all the singers, and I can certainly understand why. I'm a big Magnus Carlsen mark. I think he just writes fantastic, catchy songs, and everything the guy touches I at a minimum enjoy, and some of it I just absolutely love. And I think back to some of those Alan Land albums and stuff like that, and the guy is just like a gifted songwriter, and he really kind of went all out finding a bunch of really talented female vocalists to sing on this. So when you have all 7 voices on one track, it really does kind of stand out.
I mean, typically, like when something like this gets announced and I've actually heard of every singer, that's usually a sign that it's something that I'm going to be super excited about. It's kind of like almost like an all-female Avantasia in a lot of ways. We'll see what kind of style or what kind of story the album tells, in a macro sense when you listen to the whole thing, start to finish. I don't know if there's supposed to be a story and they're playing parts, or it's just just an album full of songs. But I mean, so far so good. It's definitely something that's on my radar, and I'm looking forward to hearing.
Something to definitely keep an eye on and look forward to.
Yeah. So let's move on to our topic of the week, and that being Vanishing Point, the Australian band based out of Melbourne, and their album that came out last year, Dead Elysium, which fans waited a long time for. It was a 6-year break since their previous album, Distant as the Sun. And, I know personally, I heard from some of the members of the band, particularly guitar player Chris Porcienko, that, there was just a lot of like scheduling conflicts. And I think Silvio's health he wasn't feeling well for a time. But I mean, once this thing came together, I mean, wow. And we'll get into details, but I'm curious, like I said before, where did you first hear about Vanishing Point? Because their first album was released in 1997, so there are no spring chickens, to say the least. But, when did you become aware of them, and what did you hear? And tell me your story.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I had never heard of them when In Thought had come out. That was their debut album, and it's a little bit raw and a little bit rougher than everything that kind of came after it. Their second release, which some people would consider their best album, called Tangled in Dream, it came out in 2000. I heard of the band after this album came out, but I had never heard the band. I had just heard of this album. At the time, I was a huge, and it's no secret, I was a huge Dream Theater fan, and a lot of Dream Theater fans had gotten into this Australian prog metal band called Vanishing Point right after Tangled in Dream had come out. And I had never heard a note of their albums. It was, they weren't the most, the easiest to get at that point. And it wasn't like you could just go on YouTube and kind of just check out some of the songs. So I have vivid memories of them recording an acoustic set for an FM radio station in late 2003. And that was, again, on the heels of this album. So what I wound up doing is they had posted something on their website saying they wanted to make it available to hear this acoustic unplugged set in early 2004. So my first exposure to the band was downloading this acoustic set and hearing a bunch of tracks from the first 2 albums. And I was floored because it was obviously very stripped down and basic, but the melodies is really what stood out to me. Some of these prog bands, they kind of go off in directions and you can't really, the songs are all over the place. That was the complete antithesis of Vanishing Point to me back in 2004, because it was just so melodic and so catchy, and the songs kind of stayed with you, as opposed to them just showing off their chops, because obviously they were very talented musicians. So I heard this broadcast and then immediately bought a copy of Tangled in Dream in close proximity. I was able to track down a copy, and since then I've managed to purchase every single release. But like you said, they're a band that they don't release albums very often, and there's often big gaps of 5 or even 7 years in between albums. So when I heard that Dead Elysium was coming out, I was very excited.
Yeah, same here. And I mean, when the band played at Prog Power, and I'll probably tell some stories from that, they were talking about how they were, still in the process of recording it. And this was 3 or 4 years ago, I believe. But, as you described them, I mean, that's the kind of prog metal that I glom onto right away is when I hear a band that has these sort of catchy hooks and that the melodicness, I think of other like prog bands like Royal Hunt or Vanden Plas is another one where like you just listen to them and like it's instead of like kind of like what I mentioned with Zero Hour where it's very like technical and meandering at times, like this is really like just straight to the point, like kick your ass like metal. And that's why this was a band that for me was like easy to get into right away, even though I tend to be more of a power metal guy than a prog metal guy. This is one of my favorite prog metal bands.
And I don't even know if I would necessarily. I mean, I understand they're a prog metal band. There's no question about it. But to me, I always just considered them more of like a melodic metal band because it almost borders on the melodic more than it does the progressive. But that's just me. I don't know that everyone would agree. But to me, they're just like almost like an easy listening melodic band because as talented as they are, I don't know that their chops shine through as much as they probably could because they emphasize the songwriting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we don't really need to particularly put a label on them. I have them labeled in my library as melodic progressive metal, which is kind of like both of what we're saying, I guess.
Yeah,
but, my introduction to Vanishing Point was through Sonata Arctica, and for those who don't know, Vanishing Point opened for Sonata Arctica. And I got to hear the story from Chris himself, which was a real blast because I remember telling him that, I knew the song Two Minds, One Soul because Sonata Arctica, I guess after they had gone on tour with Vanishing Point, they liked the song so much that they asked to cover it and they released a studio cover of it. And it came out on one of their singles, I think during the, I want to say it was during the Winter Hearts Guild recordings. I'm pretty sure. Maybe it might have been Reckoning Night after that, but somewhere in that area I remember hearing that single and that song and I was like, oh, what a good song. And then it said Vanishing Point cover and I'm like, oh, they must be this huge band that Sonata Arctica's go, because Sonata Arctica had covered the Scorpions and Iron Maiden and all that, so I'm
Halloween
like, wow,
and all that other stuff.
Vanishing Point, it must be a huge deal.
I remember that too, and I was like, sometimes you see bands do covers and you're not terribly surprised, even if it's outside their genre. But to hear this like power metal band, and again, at the time they recorded the cover, they were very much different than the Sonata Arctica we now know today, and just in terms of their, it was a classic prog, power metal band, and then here they are covering basically a prog band from Australia that not many people had heard of, especially at that point. I was like shocked. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Tangled and Dream was my first exposure to the band. So I was shocked that they had covered Two Minds, One Soul, but they did a great job. And you know what? That's something we should probably post as well, just because it's so well done.
Yeah, it's definitely worth hearing. And so then I think the first Vanishing Point, actual song that they wrote and performed that I heard was Somebody Save Me from the Embrace the Silence album. And I think that was at a time, it was in around 2005, 2006, where, I had gotten out of college the year before and I kind of lost track of some of the newer bands. And I really was only following the bands that I kind of got into in high school and wasn't really opening myself up to new stuff. And I think you had suggested just a number of different bands that you thought I would like, Power Quest being one of them. And I remember you saying, check out this song, Somebody Save Me by Vanishing Point. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is definitely my sort of thing. And then after that, I would go on to purchase their next couple of albums, Fourth Season and Distance is the Sun, or Distant is the Sun, I should say, which I very much enjoyed. And that was, by the time that came out in 2014, I was back, listening to metal again, with a vengeance, making up for lost time, I suppose. But, that album came out in 2014, and in between the time that album was released and Dead Elysium was released last year, Vanishing Point had been invited to come to Prog Power USA and play their first and up to this point only show in the US. Tell me what what happened to you that year?
Yeah, I didn't see the show. I celebrated the birth of my second daughter, so I was not at the show that year. And ironically enough, as much as I obviously enjoy the festival and I've basically been there every year, this was one of the bands that I was looking forward to the most, and I never got to see them. So I'm hoping that at some point they make their way back here, just because obviously and we'll get into Dead Elysium, obviously a very, very strong album, but I never got the chance to see them, and they're one of the few bands that are like kind of on my bucket list. And the irony is, I would have obviously had the chance to see them. It just wasn't meant to be for other reasons.
All right, well, we'll get back to Prague Power. Let's talk about the album. What were your thoughts? I'm trying to remember. Were they on your list, your 2020 list?
Yeah, they were. I believe that they were like somewhere around 23 or something like that. The exact number escapes me, but obviously this was an album that I spent quite a bit of time with last year. But even going back and listening to it about 5 times this week, I actually think I liked it more this time around than I did last year, if that makes any sense. And I'll explain why. I, to this point, have a soft spot in my heart for Tangled and Dream, just because it was like kind of my exposure to the band. And my favorite album had been Embrace the Silence, because I thought the hooks on that album were just absolutely tremendous. And I actually went back and listened to part of it this week, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's a reason why I love that disc so much. I think that the new album is probably their deepest album. I can't say that my favorite songs are on there, although we'll get to 1 or 2 that are just absolute standout tracks for me. But I thought that from 1 to 10, every song was very, very good. And like, you could see that they put a lot of effort into making this just an absolute crushing return after a 6-year hiatus, if you will. For me, I think it just starts out so strong with Dead Elysium being one of the most catchy melodic songs on the disc. And Count Your Days obviously being another kind of mid-paced, really catchy tune. I think it's a perfect start to the album. If I had one complaint, it would be that a lot of the songs, or I would see about 7 or 8 of the songs, are kind of that mid-tempo sound. And even though they're very melodic, they have that similar pacing to them, and that there wasn't enough of a dichotomy throughout the album where it was kind of took you on a journey of ups and downs. The flip side, though, I think that Salvis, which I'll just take it right here and tell you this is my song of the week, that song, between the lyrics, the phenomenal video that they put out for it, that to me was the best song on the album. And and I think that what I loved is you had 3 songs that kind of started off the album that were kind of catchy mid-tempo bangers, and then you had this power ballad, which was phenomenal. And it's just one of the catchiest songs in their entire catalog, at least to me.
I totally agree with what you said about like the album itself kind of it's kind of the same tempo for the most part from start to finish. And it was kind of hard for me I know what my favorite song is, and it's the same as yours. So the hard part for me would actually be picking like a backup song, because all the songs are so good to me, like, and they're all in that same sort of vein. So like, what do you choose?
Yeah, it's funny because they're like similar in length, similar in style, similar in tempo. I think that there's certain things about other songs that stand out, and I'll get to that. But to me, it's some of the tracks are a little bit indistinguishable unless you're really, really concentrating on them. And to me, it's like just one awesome, like 45-minute loop of songs, or, hours worth of songs that are just on a loop. That's my only gripe about the album, and why I guess I don't have it as like a 10, because it's missing that element that, some of the other albums had, but yet every song in and of himself is excellent.
Right. And that, I totally agree. To me, like, I actually completely listened to the wrong album prepping for this episode. It was just one of those weeks, and I was listening to the album we're talking about next week, Symphony X's New Mythology Suite, for like, I think it was like Wednesday or Thursday night. It just hit me, and I'm like, I've been listening to the wrong album. But thankfully, we were talking about an album that I really didn't need to do a lot of, extra listening on, because I listened to this album a lot last year and prepping for our best of 2020 episode. So I listened to it, I think, 3 times since I remembered what the hell I was supposed to be doing. And I listened to it a couple of times today, actually, with headphones on, and listened to this album with headphones on. The production is so strong. And shout out to Dean Wells of Terra Maze, who produced this album for Vanishing Point. The sound is so crisp. The guitars sound great. The drums sound great. And I mean, Silvio, his vocals are so fantastic. This is a guy who's got such a unique voice, and his voice is such a strong point to this band to kind of go with, Bushy and Chris's good, guitar dual, whatever you want to call it, because the guitar work is so strong, but the vocals are so good. I'm glad you bring that up. I just want to say one thing. If you listen to like the other really kind of ballady song on the album, Free, I think it's probably Silvio's best vocal performance on any Vanishing Point disc. I thought his vocals on that track were outstanding, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. Sometimes he's so clean and so good that he kind of gets lost to the just the melodies of the songs. But I thought like Free, I just thought it was like a breakout performance for him. I think that just one of the draws of this band is that I can't think of anybody that sounds like Silvio. Like, he just has such a
unique voice.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, it carries over live. Like, getting to see them live, he sounded just as good. And, I don't know if he was nervous or just like really focused, but meanwhile, the rest of the band were like just partying, having a great time, talking to everybody. Silvio was like very, very serious the few times I saw him before the performance, and then afterwards he was just like everybody else, having a blast. But he, I think, was really focused on really doing a great job live, and he certainly did.
What I guess I'll ask you, what if you have to pick your track of the week, which one are you going with? And I think that there's obviously 9 other worthy contenders, but I'm curious to see what you ultimately decide after having stole your thunder. Yeah,
I think, it'd be a close call between the first 2 tracks, Dead Elysium and Count Your Days. And it's actually kind of cool because those are the 2 songs that Chris sent me the demos for like months before, almost a year before the album came out. And I didn't really tell anybody because, I just didn't want to, I thought he was doing me a solid and letting me hear it. And so I didn't really want to like break that trust. But, so I had been, I'd heard those songs before they were released. So, if I had to pick one, I guess I would probably just go with Dead Elysium, just edges it out. I love just how it starts, not just the song, but the whole album with that, that piano, intro. And one of the things that, another thing that really stands out about Vanishing Point, for a band that doesn't have like a name, like a keyboard player, there's so many like fantastic orchestrations throughout this album. You would think that they would have a guy that, I don't know if it's just one of the members of the band takes care of the keyboard parts or whatever, or the orchestrations, but it's so just that part of when you listen to it and you just hear that, there's so much classical influence, and I love that mixed with,
and I think it's part
those
of
guitar
this.
parts.
It's so Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think it's just such a critical part of their sound. I was surprised to find that out as well, just because to me, it's like it's not Vanishing Point without those keyboards and those orchestration parts that kind of just lend itself to the music. It's such an integral part of their sound. I'm surprised that I couldn't even tell you who actually plays that on the albums.
Yep, and I'm kind of looking, and I'm not really seeing anything that says it for sure. So maybe it's just a group effort, but it's such an integral part to their sound. So you know, I don't know that I really have too much to say specifically from track to track, just because I just really enjoy like this whole album. Kind of all the songs are just all great to me. So like that's kind of how I feel.
I'll say a couple of things. The song that I had always struggled with the most on this album was To the Wolves. And maybe that's just because it has these two bangers to begin the album. And my favorite track, Salvis, is the fourth track. To the Wolves is kind of like sandwiched in between there. I came around on that though, having listened to it a bunch this week. It is a really solid track. So I think that's just a testament to how good the album is. And just going back to Salvis for a second, the bombastic nature of that track, it almost reminds me of a Devin Townsend track in certain ways. And every time I hear it, I feel like it's something that Devin would have released on one of his more recent albums, where he's got like the big orchestration and like just like the crescendo of sound. And again, this is coming from someone who's not as I guess musically inclined as some other people. So my description, I don't even know that it's necessarily on point, but just that crescendo of sound that they have on Salvis, it reminds me of a Devin Townsend song, and that's not a bad thing. It's actually a really, really good thing, and I think they do it well.
Yep, couldn't agree more. I just remember when this song was released as a single, maybe about a month before the rest of the album came out, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean,
yeah.
It's just I if you didn't choose it, that would have been definitely my pick of the week as well. But it's just a real, like, for an album full of like really good songs, this one is really great.
And I'll say this, you know, Vanishing Point is one of those bands that whenever they come out with an album, I wind up playing it so much. And then there's this hiatus for them, you know, like I said, between these albums, and I kind of don't go back to them that much. And it's not because the albums aren't great, but just because other things come out. There's new things. There's bands that are just releasing albums a little more consistently. And I wind up going back and I'm like blown away when I do, but I just don't listen to them as much as I guess some other bands. And that's on me. I'll just read something funny. I got a text message from someone, and this person does not listen to the show, so this is not a plug for somebody that's out there, but I got a text message out of the blue on February 18th. So it was about a week and a half ago now. And this is, I'll just read it. It goes, quote, "Had it for 7 months. Didn't think much upon the first listen. Put it aside. Just gave it a second spin. In big capital letters, awesome. Next message, the latest Vanishing Point." So he had no idea we were doing this album, and that was somebody else's opinion. It just kind of hit him too upon that second listen. To me, this is kind of a grower of an album, and I enjoyed it when I first heard it, but I even enjoyed it more this time around as opposed to the couple times that I listened to it back in 2020.
I guess there's like, when people ask us like, you know, would you like to talk about this, or, you know, put in a request or whatever, like, I'd say most of the time I'm pretty excited about it, but like, you know, sometimes it's kind of like, all right, I'm really going to have to kind of like pay attention and really take some notes and really listen to this with you know, an open mind, more so than maybe I had in the past. This was not one of those albums. This was just like something I was like, this is going to be easy for me to listen to. Because I just knew how much I enjoyed listening to it before. I was just like, oh, great, I get to listen to the latest Vanishing Point album a few times. And I was so excited I listened to Symphony X for 4 days first. So.
Yeah, you just wanted to keep the suspense building. So, you know, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, you know, the band's trip to the U.S. when they played at Prague Power USA. They had to fly through the United Arab Emirates, which I'm not 100% sure. Are we blocked by them on YouTube or no? I'm
not
sure.
yet, but I actually, we got blocked again in the 4 countries that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. So consistent, if nothing else. But to all of our fans in the UAE, keep listening. Thank you. We appreciate the support.
Shout out to Qatar.
Yeah.
So they had to do a connecting flight from Australia to Qatar to to Atlanta. So I mean, it was a heck of a trip for them. So they I think they were in Atlanta for just about a week, and we got in on Tuesday night. We usually come in a bit early. The first day of bands is on Wednesday, and we're sitting outside and we're like, all right, it's our friend Amy's birthday. We just spent 15 hours in the car. We're going to have one drink, go to bed, and, start the day fresh. And sure enough, we end up meeting most of the band and, just hanging out in the courtyard of the hotel, drinking beers, getting to know each other, telling stories, hearing, former bass player Adrian doing his Borat impression. I mean, it was laughs. We met Chris first. He was outside barefoot. I think he was just outside smoking a cigarette. And, I said to him, dude, he was super friendly. And I was like, dude, why are you so familiar to me? Why do you look so familiar to me? And he goes, in his unmistakable Australian accent, I play guitars for Vanishing Point. And I'm like, that's why I know you from seeing you in the music videos. Cause, nowadays we buy all our albums digitally. At least I do. I don't look at liner notes anymore. So I don't know what anybody looks like in these bands. So that was how I met Chris Porcienko. And I would go on to meet, Bushy. His real name is James, but he goes by Bushy. And if you've seen his beard, you'd understand why. And, Adrian was also with them. And, they had a drummer who was filling in for their previous drummer who had just left the band, and he didn't end up staying with the band. They announced actually that Damian Hall would be their new drummer. I believe he recorded the drums on Dead Elysium, and Gaston Chin was announced as a new bass player, replacing Adrian, who I think had just he was starting a family, and I think he just wanted to kind of do his own thing. So, but oh my God, the laughs that we had, the next thing it was like 4:30 in the morning, and we were like,
Prog so much Power for the one beer.
Yeah. Prog Power hasn't even started yet. And we're sitting outside at 4:30 in the morning with a cooler and half of Vanishing Point. And I was just glad they weren't playing the next day, because I would have felt bad that if they all came out on stage all groggy and hungover. So after that, we were just they would come find us in the courtyard, every night, because we were the only ones there the first night. So that's who they met first. And, to say that these guys weren't the nicest people. I mean, they were going around, they hung out every night. They talked to anybody that wanted to talk to them, took photos. Once Silvio got to perform on Friday night, he was out there, hamming it up with everybody. His wife was with him. He was having the time of his life. And, what's funny is that on the last night everybody was there on Saturday night, I had said to them in my stupor, I'm going to take you guys out to dinner at the Vortex tomorrow night, because everybody else is going to go home. We'll still be here. And I'm thinking to myself, the next day I'm hungover. They're not going to remember this. And sure enough, I got a Facebook Messenger message from Chris, and he's like, so what time are we heading out to dinner? And I'm like, oh crap, not that I don't want to have dinner with them, but I would rather just lay in bed until I have to leave on Monday. But sure enough, I mustered up enough energy, and I had my car with me down there, so I was driving all of Vanishing Point, Silvio's wife, and the bass player from what was the name of the band? He was there. He was visiting the
Black Majesty.
Yes, Black Majesty. He was there too, just hanging out. He was there that first night too. I forgot to mention him. Another great dude. He was just happened to be there.
And you were driving what, like an Ultima at the time, right?
Yeah. So I had to take everybody. I had to take everybody in, I think, 3 separate trips, and I also had Amy and our friend Mike Riley with us as well. And so I think 3 trips. I got everybody to the Vortex. They can't even see us at one table because there's so many of us. I park my car. Finally, I come inside. We sit down. Adrian's a vegan, and we're at the Vortex, so we just order him like a gigantic plate of French fries. It's about the only thing he could eat in the whole restaurant. And we're just sitting there, and we're just eating, shooting the shit, whatever. And it's time to go. I go outside. I go to my car, and there's a boot on my car. I got booted in Atlanta because I parked in a 15-minute parking zone on a Sunday night that I didn't notice. And I'll never forget the quote that came out of Bushy's mouth. And he just looks up at the sign and he looks at me and he just goes, "That's an expensive lesson in reading." So I ended up having to pay
it'll last a lifetime, right?
I ended up having to pay $80 to get a cop to come and remove the boot from my car. I gave him my credit card, and these guys felt so bad that they paid for my ticket. I mean, Silvio insisted that like he put the fear of God in me with the look that he gave me. Like if I didn't take his money, I was going to end up with cement shoes somewhere. But it was so funny. And just to cap off that story, the sticker that they put on your car, I don't know if you remember color forms when you were a kid, but they were like those things that like stick onto windows and you could peel them right off or whatever.
Yeah.
That's what they use for the ticket. Like it just says like, they put it on your window and it's like, call this number to get the boot removed. So I kept it and I signed it and I gave it to Chris and I said like, "To Vanishing Point, thanks for like a week that'll, a memory that'll last a lifetime, and expensive lessons in reading." And I signed it and I gave it to him, and knowing him, he probably still has it. But that was my personal experience with Vanishing Point at Prog Power Atlanta. And needless to say, they put on a hell of a show as a band. But that 1 hour compared to all the other hours of entertainment is kind of funny. That's kind of like the fleeting memory I have is the actual live performance as compared to the personal experience. So.
Yeah, it's when the personal experience, I think sometimes even enhances the enjoyment of the band. Just if people are that nice. I wish I had the chance to meet them. I'll ask you this question before I ask you to rate the album. Do you have any idea what the plans are? Is it going to be another 6 or 7 years before we get a Vanishing Point disc?
My guess would be like, it's probably going to be for them, the 4, 5, 6 year, just because like everybody in the band has got, families and their own things going on. So just to get everybody in, together to get everything done is hard for them. And being that, Vanishing Point isn't their primary job.
Sure.
Unfortunately it can't be their first priority, but, whenever it is that it does come out, I have little doubt it's going to be just as fantastic as this album was. And I'm hoping that in the interim, kind of like they did in between Dead Elysium and the previous release, maybe we'll get another visit from them to the States. I know that I'm always pushing for them to come back whenever I talk to any of the Prog Power promoters. And especially for like you and Mike, who were really looking forward to seeing them and couldn't make it that year. It would be nice to give you guys kind of a mulligan on that one.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, they've done so many successful tours throughout Europe and obviously Australia and New Zealand, but to get them back in the States at least one more time would be fantastic. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. Scale of 1 to 10, what are you giving Dead Elysium?
This is a 9.0 for me. Just a really, really strong fan, like just really great album. I don't know that I would call it a classic, but it's just it's as good as you could possibly want from an album in this vein, this type of music. The vocals are fantastic. The production is so crisp and so clean. The guitar work is fabulous. Like, the vocals, like I said, of Silvio is unmatched. This is really just pretty much as good as it gets for this genre of music. Definitely a 9.0 for me.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I give it a really strong 8.5, and I would say I just think it's their most complete album, so I look forward to hearing more, obviously. But I just thought that it was jam packed, and there's not a dull moment for the entire hour that you're listening to it. It's just a really solid disc from beginning to end, and like I said, I think it's their most complete album, and I say that with a ton of love for like Embrace the Silence and even in the last album, Distance is the Sun. Very good, but I do think that this may have topped them all, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for taking the time to make an album exactly the way you want to. I mean, you have 6 years to really to temper it and make any sort of changes you need to make. I mean, in all honesty, if you had to wait 6 years for an album to come out, anything less than what they produced would have been disappointing, just for the amount of time that it took. And they did not disappoint. I mean, the songwriting in this band has always been so unbelievably strong. And I think, with age, it's just, these guys are just going to keep writing better and better songs. And this is just an example of that. And again, you take 6 years of your best songwriting, and instead of cramming it into 3 albums and then writing some lesser, songs that maybe aren't as good. I mean, I think that, maybe this is a secret to their success, is kind of, spacing out their albums a bit more, so that only the 10 best songs that they came up with in 6 years make it onto the album.
Yeah, it's like a perfect example of less is more, and I think that it speaks to why the entire discography is probably as good as it is. And I guess with that, let's put a bow on Vanishing Point. We obviously appreciate the request. We'd asked everyone that's out there to keep giving us the positive feedback. Write us a review so other people can help find the show, because we know you're out there. We know you're listening, but the comments help even more people find it. So we would obviously appreciate that. And next week, we'll go back to Symphony X's 5 album, which had been kind of hijacked with the Ghislaine news, and obviously the first of the month request that we try to give as of late. And then I'll have something in store after we do Symphony X next week.
Yeah, and since we are doing Symphony X next week, that should mean that I will be listening to Stradivarius for the week.
Well, at this point, you're already prepped for Symphony X. You don't even have to listen, right?
Yeah, I mean, hey, listen, that's an album that's definitely worth going back to. So,
yeah, for sure.
I'm really looking forward to discussing that. We're sorry if anybody was really looking forward to it that it got delayed, but we never had any plans of canceling it. We just kind of sometimes got to make prioritize some other things, but yeah, I'm looking forward to you picking the album after that. I feel like it's been a while since
it has, and I have this ongoing list, and I at this point I don't even know which. I had something chosen, but now I feel like I should choose something else, just because we've kind of gone in a little bit of different directions ourselves. So I have to actually narrow it down now. I have this massive list that I've begun to compile.
Yeah, not to mention, like you said at the start of the show, the some of the requests that we've been getting, and really good suggestions too. It's probably stuff that we might have gotten to eventually, but this is kind of gonna make it happen, expedite it a little bit quicker than maybe we had planned, which is fine by me. I have enjoyed talking about albums that I knew start to finish, like Avantasia and Delaine, and I've really enjoyed talking about albums that I didn't know that well, like 0 Hour and Iron Maiden's Killers. So yeah, bring it on, everybody. We welcome the suggestions, and we appreciate the feedback, and yeah, just everything Justin said, I second it.
Awesome. With that, we'll put a bow on Vanishing Point, and we'll come back next week with some Symphony X. Have a good week, buddy.
All right, you too. Take care.